Tina, can you hear me?
I can, Tom.
Terrific. I was glad. I was hoping that was going to work, that I was going to be able to do that with you. Let me see if I can do it with Alicia as well. No, she is not in yet. Ask to unmute. Ask to unmute. Craig, you there?
I am here.
Perfect. Alicia?
Hi,
Hello. Terrific.
how you doing?
Doing just fine. Glad everybody was able to join in. So for those who are joining on and logging in at this time, we are going to start up in just about 2 minutes or so. Hopefully what you see on the screen is just the Thirsty for Knowledge Thursdays slide. Is that correct, Craig?
It is.
Perfect. Look at that. I made it work. How about that? Every now and then I surprise even myself. So like I said, we'll get started up here in about, it's supposed to be 4:30, so we'll give it another minute so. We know it takes a little bit for people to get logged in and get on the screen, so but we don't want to, hold people up. So we'll start up right around 4:30 or so, and then as people join in, and one of the things we do every time we do these anyway is we always record the sessions and then post them to the website. So that's always available. Otherwise, you get nothing but dead silence for a little while, but that's okay. We don't have we have to get Muzak at some point, Craig. That's what we'll have to do.
Oh, music. Okay.
Well, it's Muzak, right? The filter stuff in the background.
Mm-hmm. We can do that.
Yeah. Either that, or you can play your shillelagh there, or your little.
Shillelagh?
Yeah.
I have a harmonica. I can play that.
There you go. All right, so we're right at the bottom of the hour now, and I know we got a couple of people who've joined on, and so we've got others, and we're expecting more. But as it goes along, they can join in and join with us. So we like to make sure that we stay on time and get launched right away once we do these. So just to this is Thirsty for Knowledge Thursdays. It is a weekly webinar series that is brought to you by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education, Inc.
Happened. I got your background music. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't need the background music. So one of the things we do every week, as part of this, is we try to bring different topics, different subjects, and go through that. I want to make sure that you have boarded the right flight for this evening. Tonight we are doing inclusion and diversity. That's steps and ways an employer can hire individuals who are differently abled or have a disability. And we are very excited to have with us the Perkins School for the Blind, their career launch program. I will bring them on. I know there was a question about whether or not we were going to have everybody from the program available with us. So I will bring them on, though, in a little bit to make sure that they get to introduce themselves as far as what we're doing. I'm just cleaning up a little bit and a little house cleaning as we go through that. So we do have a pre-check flight list for everybody, a pre-flight checklist that we like to do. The microphones, we've got them muted except for those who are going to be presenting. If you want to have your camera on, that's fine. We don't mind. We used to do a webinar where we did not allow cameras at all. Even Craig and I did not have them on. We do ask that if you do have questions, you do take advantage of the chat box. And Craig, is my co-pilot, will make sure that if there are questions, we will give some time for Q&A at the end. But if you do have questions, we will, try to answer them as we go along with that. And he will also make sure that I stay on pace here with everything that we're doing. So your pilots, as I said, I am Tom Alessi. I am the president of the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. I have been in financial services for more than 20 years now. I am an investment advisor, which means that I am a fiduciary and act as a fiduciary in the capacity whenever I'm dealing with any of my clients or any of their stuff. Craig, if you want to bring yourself in and introduce yourself real quick.
Sure. So I'm Craig Richardson. As it says, I'm the Vice President of Aries. I've been in the financial services world a little over 16 years now. When my focus is mostly working on financial planning, comprehensive planning for families and small businesses.
All right, tremendous. So now I am going to bring in our special guest. I believe, based on what I was told earlier, that Brian is not able to be with us. Is that correct?
Yes, unfortunately, that is correct.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully, everything is well with Brian and that. But I am going to bring on Alicia, and then she'll bring on Dina. And then Dina, you just let me know when I'm going to slide to the next slide, and you can talk a little bit about what Career Launch is. Okay. So Alicia, introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, Tom and Craig. Really happy to be here with everybody today. My name is Alicia Smith, and I'm the Associate Director of Training for Career Launch at Perkins. And we'll get into a little bit about what all that means, but I've been with Perkins for about 1.5 years now, working on this program, and my colleague Dina is also joining us.
It's true. Thanks, Alicia. So my name is Dina Chris. I'm the Associate Director of Recruitment and Admissions for Career Launch at Perkins. I've been formally with the team for just about 1 year now, just hit my anniversary a few days ago. And
congratulations.
Thank you so much, Tom. And I was fortunate enough to be consulting with the team for about 1 year prior to that as the program was being built. And we've now launched the program about 1 year ago, and we're excited to talk about it and talk about this entire giant issue of disability employment and inclusion tonight. So whenever you're ready, Tom, we can start talking about what Career Launch is. So
all
Career
yours.
Launch, thank you, Tom. Career Launch is a job training program that was specifically developed for young adults who are impaired get on their career path. So often, a disability, as we'll discuss plenty tonight.
So Dina, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second, just so you know that you're bouncing in and out a little bit. So just so you're aware,
okay.
so just be aware of that. We'll try to keep it on track and on pace with everything.
About that. So Career Launch was created out of the idea that there's a major problem, which is a huge employment rate in the blind and visually impaired community. Among those that are able to work, if you break it out, that statistic is 70% of adults who are blind and visually impaired and able to work are unemployed. So we wanted to really tackle that specific issue, and our program was developed with the idea that if we can provide real-world job skills along with job readiness training and very intensive customized career support, we could help with that problem. So the way that we do it is a combination of very intensive full-time training followed by long and collaborative career services support. So we work with participants, we assess them, we work with applicants and their states to assess fit for the program. We work with them very intensively to train them in the area of customer success. We teach them real-world job skills, we teach them technology, we teach them lots of job readiness and communication skills. We provide job placement support, peer counseling, and we do a lot of work on the back end, building relationships with employment partners, both locally and nationally, to make sure that employers are ready and willing and able to hire the incredible candidates that we produce. So our theory was that if there is an unconscious bias, which we know there is in hiring adults who are blind and visually impaired, that we need to not only level that playing field, but we need to make sure our candidates are actually more qualified than their typically cited peers. So that's the goal of our program, that our participants come out armed with more knowledge and are better prepared than anyone else who's applying for that job.
That's great. Yep, yeah. Terrific. Appreciate you sharing that. And we're going to go through some of this and talk, like we said, some of the steps, some of the FAQs, and going through this with Career Launch, how that works, how it works in the greater scheme of everything, and sort of how to tie it all back together. we, as just a quick plug on us, the Aries Foundation for Financial Education, we are a nonprofit. You can visit us at ariesfoundation.org. Our goal is to help everyone have a better relationship with their money. Our mission is we believe that financial wellness is a contact sport. And we mean that literally, that there's got to be hand holding, there's got to be guidance, there's got to be encouragement, because all the planning and tools and software in the world, it doesn't work unless there is engagement that goes on. And that's really what we try to bring to organizations, to employees, to individuals, is that engagement into the process. Before I get started up, we do have some disclosures. These are purely educational webinars. We do share them, so we make them available. Like I said, they're recorded, they're put onto the website. We're in the process of updating and really having a YouTube channel available. It's sort of there, but nobody really ever knows it's there, which we are working on to update that. But we just ask that if you are, sharing this or using it, you're using it for that educational purposes only. The Aries Foundation for Financial Education it's a nonprofit and not affiliated with any securities-related business, and it is not a registered investment advisor. We recommend, Craig and I strongly, to everybody, that if you've got questions, whether that's financial, tax, or legal, that you seek out the help of a professional to help you with those questions. And one last piece of fun with everything, there are drinks on this flight. So we do call this Thirsty for Knowledge Thursdays, or what we refer to as Think with a Drink, because while we take this information that we share with everyone very, very seriously, we don't take ourselves very seriously. And we want to make sure that you're in a relaxed and enjoyable environment as you're trying to take in all that we're trying to put out there as far as information is concerned. So we like to say, have a cold one to go along with us. If you don't imbibe, find something that's refreshing for you to enjoy. Myself, personally, this evening, I'm drinking Pearly, which is from Springdale, which is the sister brewery to Jack's Abbey out in Framingham, for anybody that knows Jack's Abbey. Craig, what are you drinking tonight?
Well, because the pilot is drinking, like most commercial flights, the co-pilot's not drinking. I'm having Lipton. Diet green tea in mixed berry, actually.
Mixed berry, there you go. So I would be drinking an Arnold Palmer if I wasn't imbibing this evening. So I'm going to say skål, and let's move on. Okay. So Alicia, Dina, which one of you is taking this? I know this was going to be Brian's slide, so which one of you is taking this?
I'll take it.
Hey, your mic.
Fix your mic, Tom.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for that. See, I was drinking. That's what happens. There we go. I've already lost it.
Right.
So, Dina, if you can, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start by saying that when this presentation is over, I will be enjoying a gin and tonic. But until then, I have water. So let's talk a little bit about why disability inclusion is important. There are about 57 million people in the US who have a disability. Obviously, that means a lot of things. 19.3% of people with a disability were unemployed in 2019. That's a big number. 73% of people believe that a person who is blind can hold a job, but only 28% of those people think a person who is blind could do their job. So it speaks to a lot of just lack of understanding within the typically sighted community. And if you broaden it out to a lack of understanding of how someone with a disability could actually do someone's job. And diversity in the workplace benefits everyone. So if you think about not only from a corporate culture standpoint, that there's a lot of research that shows that when you have a diverse and inclusive workplace, you retain your employees better, you have overall higher morale at your company. It also benefits the product. So the more diverse voices you have, the more that your product is able to be relatable to and accessible to everyone. We know that when a corporate culture has diversity and inclusion, every single person in that company feels more valued. So it benefits not only in the feel-good corporate culture way, but also it's valuable to a company's bottom line.
So I appreciate that. So I do want to jump back onto one thing you said earlier, because I just
Yeah.
want to make sure to clarify on that, because I think you had said that the 19.3%, that's actually the number that were employed. I think you had said that were not employed.
Oh, sorry, we're employed.
Yeah,
Yes.
that were employed. So let me go to that number, right? Because is that number, so that's the 2019 statistic. Is that number up from 2018, or is it flat? You know, how has that been trending, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, it's about the same. So if you look at the data from the year prior, it was 19.1%, so not that much of a difference.
Okay.
If you look back over the course of 10 years, there's been a very small increase. Obviously, this data was all before the current pandemic statistics. So
right, so that means they're probably worse now.
yes.
Right,
Yeah,
if I'm following that line of thinking, right?
Correct. Yeah. If you take into account that the national unemployment rate is much different than it was last year, then we can extrapolate that that would also be directly affecting adults living with a disability. And in fact, the hypothesis is, and there's research being done on it now, that it is disproportionately affecting that community. So it's not a straight, well, it rose this much in the general population, so you can say it rises the same in the disability community. It's actually likely rising more.
Okay, well, that would be interesting to see. I think I agree with that just on general premise, but you know, that would be interesting to see how those numbers actually shake out.
Yeah.
So I know the number is low, and we're talking about it being even lower. And later on in a couple of slides, we're going to be talking about the idea of perception versus reality. You know, what employers think or see in terms of dealing with that. But can you just give me a quick sort of general sense of why you think that number is so low?
Yeah, I mean, from what we have seen, you know, with our the employers that we talked to as we were building the program, and certainly what the population that we work with comes back and reports, there is a lot of unconscious bias. So while people are open to the idea of working with someone who has a disability, they often don't understand how that would work, and they don't understand that their company, from the minute that first point of contact, might not be welcoming to a person with disability. So things like accessibility on their website or in their job hiring process, that might be a real barrier.
I have a question here, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
From one of our viewers here. Do you think that the work from home lifestyle, with this new work from home lifestyle, that more disabled individuals can be employed?
Yes, 1,000 times yes. So one of the biggest barriers to employment for adults living with disabilities is transportation. It's reliable transportation, the ability to get to work on a specific schedule. So being able to work from home is going to be a huge benefit to this community because you're taking out that commuting barrier. Obviously, there's work to be done making sure everyone has the equipment that they need and the reliable internet that they need to work from home. But that seems like a much smaller hurdle than the transportation issue.
And Deanna, how did that number, the 19, not to keep beating up this number, the 19.3%, but is that 19.3% of the people who are able to work who are disabled? So
that number is of, I believe it's of adults who are able to work. So it's below 65, they're taking into account retirement age, and folks who are able to work.
That would mean people who are disabled, actively seeking employment, have an 81% unemployment rate.
Correct.
Wow.
That's the statistic. That's the issue. That's what the problem is in terms of dealing with this. Because you have, you know, and as Dina just pointed out, you know, one of the biggest things is transportation, right? Transportation is a major, major hurdle. You know, don't get me started. I have this whole thing with the able accounts that I really want them to have the ability to have some sort of transportation adage into them, but that's a completely separate animal in terms of this conversation. But one of the things with that, you know, sort of segueing from the conversation about work at home to, because I know we talked about it being, you know, that diversity in the workplace and inclusive workplaces there, right? So just a real quick, I know you said it that, it sort of gives everybody a lift up, but, how is that really impacted? Just a quick, like one of those, where is that benefit really coming? I mean, is it just a feeling that warm and fuzzy, or is there actual, hey, I'm seeing, that there are benefits and rewards on the flip side of being inclusive?
Yeah, well, I think one of them I sort of alluded to is employee retention. So when you have a more diverse workplace, all of your employee retention across the board increases, which is obviously going to save the company money, right? So there's a financial benefit. Also, there are products that are developed often with the first intention of allowing for accessibility. Texting, for example, was originally developed as a way for folks who are deaf to communicate. And now that is a huge part of the business world. So it can also
yeah,
be,
my girls don't understand what a phone is for. They just think it's for texting. They don't get the idea that you can actually make a call on the thing.
Yeah, exactly. So from a technology angle, there's also innovations that can be made that might originally be developed for accessibility that then make their way out into the broader community and can become real money makers for a company.
Okay, terrific. Appreciate that. Let's go to the next slide here. Hopefully that worked. Okay, so what's getting in the way? Right? So part of this, and this is just sort of talking that hiring process, right? So we're talking not just the visually impaired here, the greater differently abled or with a disability world, right? So a couple of those things get involved in the process itself. When we think about having to fill out an application, right? A lot of applications now have questionnaires on them. And if you don't complete the questionnaire, or you don't complete it the way the employer wants you to complete it, you're not going to get. I know this is an issue at a place like Walmart. Walmart is one of those we've got the questionnaire thing, right? That it becomes a hurdle to try to fill it out, right? One of the things that comes up a lot is gaps in employment history, right? That there's just, an employer will just not look at somebody for that. And then I know for the visually impaired, it can be hard. Certainly for those who are on the spectrum, becomes a major hurdle trying to do an interview. And maybe in today's, and I know that it sort of goes to the question that just came up, because I was just thinking of that as the question came up, maybe where the interview process may now be virtual, may be helping in that situation. I don't know, but I think that might be something that might be beneficial or helpful.
I say that Walmart has a high bar for employment.
Well, no. They ask you, it's a specific questionnaire you have to fill out. And if you don't answer the questionnaire or don't fill out the questions, you don't even get looked at.
Okay.
And so somebody who's on the spectrum trying to answer some of those questions, it's a no-win. They can't do it. So they're not going to get hired by that particular. So it's more to the point of the employers and organizations needing to make some organizational mindset changes to how their hiring process works. We'll talk about that at the end when we get into that. So let me go to the next screen here. All right. So which one of you has this one?
I've got this one.
There we go.
So I think that there are sometimes these beliefs that could be getting in the way, whether they are, founded in actual reality, or if they're just maybe on the part of the hiring managers, HR professionals. But one barrier that gets in the way is not knowing, or this idea that you don't even know how to reach people with disabilities. Oh, people with disabilities don't apply to this job. Well, you're not looking hard enough. We'll get into some of this in solutions, but that's definitely, I think, a barrier that some companies face or don't understand how to reach that audience of people with disabilities. Another huge barrier is not understanding the abilities of people with disabilities. So if you are somebody who doesn't have a disability, it may be really hard to imagine how you would do a particular job function. Because you haven't had to adapt, because you don't have to. Whereas somebody who is living with a disability and who has likely been dealing with that for a long time, they have adapted and they have learned skills and techniques to do almost all of the job functions, depending on the job, of course, that, any person without a disability could do. I think companies have a bit of a misunderstanding about workplace accommodations. Workplace accommodations are a guarantee by law that employers need to have in place for employees who require them. And so there may be some not understanding how it works, thinking it might be expensive, not knowing how to go about that, or not knowing even
Right.
what.
And I think, Alicia, just to chime in with that, that's one of the questions I think that comes up a lot, right? Which is, gee, if I wanted to get, if I wanted to do, I want to do this, right? But isn't this going to mean I have to purchase all of this additional tech or make all these accommodations that I don't have? But what you're saying is they already need to be there, right? As an
Right.
employer, you need to have them in place anyway, regardless of whether you have somebody who is hired with a disability or not.
Right. And in some cases, such as handicapped accessibility, or in wheelchair accessibility, I should say, that's something that's built into design now. That wasn't always that way. Of course, we know the ADA and the history of that. So that's generally in place from the beginning. If an employer hires somebody who's blind, they don't need to have technology in place before if they've never had a person who is blind working there. So they may not understand how to get that technology. It isn't very expensive at all, and the state will work with the employer to have it in place. So it's really, there are resources for it, and it doesn't take too much work. We live in such an information-heavy world. It doesn't take a lot of work to find out some of this stuff. But it's just the not knowing and the what gets us into the next one, the fear of what you don't know or of making a mistake. Right. Especially maybe saying the wrong thing or asking the wrong question, or thinking that you're going to embarrass yourself or that person, put somebody on the spot. And there's a lot of fear of the unknown around, I think, hiring people with disabilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'd be a true statement too to say that anybody who's actively looking for work who has disabilities has an acumen for overcoming challenges to begin with. That's something an employer would be looking for, because these people aren't making excuses. They are getting out there and getting it done.
Yeah. I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Yep. And we'll touch on that fear of the unknown when we get into the solutions thing in a second here. So, all right. And this is what I mentioned with the perception, not reality, right? Mm-hmm. So this comes from the Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM, SHRM, otherwise known, right? And it's really, they did a whole research and a whole project behind how hiring managers and HR managers look at individuals who are differently abled or have a disability, right? And what they found, that percentage there was that of the managers they talked to, 32% of them said they were, somewhat or very uncomfortable working with a colleague with a mental health disability. And then you can see 26% said, it's somebody who is an intellectual disability, and then 13%, so a lot lower number, with somebody who's got a physical disability. But these were all still, those are, still fairly large numbers. You're talking 1/3 of the people who were hiring there, on the first one with a mental health situation, and there's certainly 25% of the individuals with an intellectual disability. However, when they turn the question around and ask them, do you think these individuals could actually handle or do the job? The overwhelming response was yes. 92% of the hiring managers said yes, and 97% of HR managers believe that the individual can do the job. So that's the disconnect. That's where that perception versus reality, which is what we were talking about, Dina, you had mentioned it in your slide previously, that there's this major disconnect between, how that bridge is not being built, right? It is the gap is still there, but it's only because we're letting ourselves fall into it, I guess, is the only way to, in terms of trying to put that.
Yeah, I think in confronting your own, is this something that I own because it's maybe how I think? And then what does that mean for me as a manager of staff or of hiring? For sure. Yep.
All right, and so this one, solutions. Who's got solutions? This one's on
I've
you
got
guys, right?
solutions, yes. So these are I'll admit, these are pretty big solutions. And the first one, create an inclusive workplace and company culture. That in itself is a huge undertaking, and we could spend hours talking about just that.
Right.
But it is, and Dina sort of mentioned this in the beginning, or I'm sorry, I don't know, somebody mentioned this earlier. Even the first impression that somebody gets of your company, they probably look at the job posting and then they check out the website, right? So is that accessible to everybody? Can they access that website or that job application? What sort of opinions are they forming from there? And I think the way to start creating this inclusive workplace and company culture is really to talk with the current employees there, because in the world of disability, there are a lot of what we would call as an invisible disability. And so people, in order to show up as your full self and your best self at work, there needs to be inclusion. Everybody should be able to feel comfortable to be their self at work and be at their best. And so I think just talking to your team and your staff and getting to know where people are at and what would they want in place to make it easier for them to do their job.
And actually, I'll bring this up in a slide or two, Alicia, as part of that. But one of those things is when you talk about that, the website, not only is the website accessible, what is the imagery, right? So what's being portrayed there? Is this actually an all-inclusive workplace that's being portrayed? And if that's the case, and that's really where we're starting to see a lot of those employers who are branding and being held up as this is the representative of the company. Gee, I'd like to work there because of that.
Right. Yeah,
I think that's, go ahead, Dina.
I was just going to say, I think representation matters so much, and it's not only in the imagery, but in the tone of the website, right? So if it's very difficult to navigate, even if it's technically accessible, if it's really challenging, that's going to turn off a lot of potential incredible candidates. And so thinking about not only sort of representation and the welcome, how much you're welcoming folks via imagery and wording on your website, also making sure that the use of that website has that same welcoming tone.
The other thing too, though, is, let me ask you this: how many companies out there, number one, are truly diverse as a percentage? Especially talking especially large companies, right? Probably not a lot. And the other, go ahead.
I don't have a number. I will say that there's something called the Disability Index, which ranks companies by their inclusivity for the disability community. So you can Google Disability Index and you can see the companies that receive great grades and make their top 100 list. They also sort of honor different companies and people within companies every year. So there is a way to actually go and check to see how well a company is doing in this space. And although we were sort of jokingly chiding Walmart earlier, they actually do very well on the disability index.
Yeah, I know. It's but it's one of those things where I know that's why I brought them up, because I know they get good grades and and they're high on the scale, but some of their process, it doesn't equate, right? So that's one of the things, like it, and I understand everybody's morphing and trying to do this, but that's one of those, you didn't really stop and think about how your process was going forward, right? And you've just been doing it the same way you've been doing it since you put it in place.
Right.
Well,
and that's why you need a diverse team designing the process.
Yes.
Right. For all those different too, though, that you don't want to have companies hiring people with disabilities because of the awe factor. You know what I mean? Like, I say hire them.
Absolutely.
And it's also like when you think about people with disabilities working at, say, Walmart, and not to put anybody into a pool, but you think maybe about somebody who's on the spectrum, or somebody with Downs or something like that. Like I said, the awe factor. But what I'm looking at here, and I actually had a conversation with a neurosurgeon who had lost his sight, cataracts. And I mean, the brain power this man possessed was unbelievable. So when I'm looking at an employee market with an 81% unemployment rate, pre-COVID, we're talking, we had unemployment of less than 4% on average in this country. And they're looking, employers, even I know employers who were trying to find people and couldn't, give a tremendous untapped resource there.
Absolutely.
At least
Yeah.
in my opinion, because these people have all kinds of different unique skills across the, just like anybody else.
Mhm.
Just have one disability that makes it more difficult for them in certain areas, depending on.
Right. And then the compounding factors of that as well, like I think we mentioned earlier, gaps on the resume, gaps in employment. A lot of our participants in Career Launch, they could be in their mid to late 20s, even 30s, and never have paid employment.
Mm-hmm.
The employer is going to be taking a risk on that person who's never worked before, who's 30, that creates, and it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg here? Like, where is this problem starting? It just goes round and round.
And we'll talk about that in a second, because I've got that on a couple of slides as well.
Perfect.
So we can talk about this. I'm gonna move on just to keep us moving here, right?
Sure.
In terms of this, right? So this is 5 ways to sort of improve inclusivity for individuals with a disability, right? So prioritize accessibility, right? So you always want to make sure that, as Alicia had alluded to and talked about, Dina did with the workplace and how the environment is, and you want to make sure that everybody is available and can access, and that you take into all the different factors that could be involved, right? Value flexibility. We just talked about this, right? That a lot of skill sets, you don't necessarily know what an individual may have for a skill set. Craig was just telling you about somebody who's probably, not to say that he's smarter than all of us added up together, but you never know in terms of dealing with that, who just happens to be now visually impaired. But that's what you're dealing with in terms of it. You want to represent all employees. We just talked about that. That's that whole, have everybody involved, right? Make sure that you're projecting that image of it, right? Embrace storytelling. This is from that, a marketing standpoint, but you are telling the story of your workforce, right? As a company, your branding, right? That's what you're about. This is an all-inclusive environment, and if you're doing that and you're doing it properly, right, now you're building it out, like you talked about, Dina, before, which is it boosts everybody up. Yes. Right? You've got more people who are buying in, who are involved, when they see that and feel that. And a learning attitude, this is something that Craig and I feel very strongly about. Obviously, we're foundation for financial education, but a learning attitude means not just for a specific thing, but it's learning how others are, like we talked about. Like, you may not be able or know or understand, as Alicia had mentioned, how somebody else has to adapt, right? So we go to organizations all the time. One of them was dealing with a walker, and the whole organization on one day had to use a walker, had to actually walk through the whole building, do all of their things. Everybody had to have a walker so they could understand what would happen, right, for the individuals they were dealing with. It's just that type of thing when you get into it, where you start to say, now we're spreading this message out to everybody so that everybody can sort of get a sense and a handle on how that's all working.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception among hiring managers and people, who are decision makers within a company, that somehow you have to lower your bar in order to be inclusive of adults with disabilities. And my challenge to that notion is, you should never lower your bar. You need to rethink what your bar is. Yeah. So it's about your bar remaining the same or higher, and just rethinking ways to access that bar. That's all. Right. We're not telling anyone they should hire someone who can't do work. We're telling people that they need to rethink how that work should be done.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to put it in terms of rethinking the bar, but it's also that goes back to that perception versus reality. You just didn't put the bar in the right place when you were looking at it.
Right.
Well, some people forget too that we actually had a president who was in a wheelchair.
Correct.
All right, so now I'm going to one of you with get involved.
Great, thank you. So if you are interested in learning more about Career Launch, there are several ways to get involved. And Also, when we're talking about diversity and inclusion as it relates to disability employment, making partnerships with organizations like us at Career Launch and many others who are doing great work, really partnering with these disability related organizations to find talent is a great way to start if you are trying to increase your diversity and inclusion initiatives. So you can contact us at Career Launch to become an employer. Let us know when you have job postings, and we will see if we have candidates to match. When there are events at your office, if there's some sort of networking or a job fair, invite our participants to participate in those things. You can volunteer in a couple ways, such as being a mock interviewer. We also run customer service simulations as part of our training, and we're always looking for volunteer customers to call up and present a dilemma to our trainees and have them solve it for you. We're always looking for guest speakers as well on a number of different topics relating to careers in customer success, and help us spread the word. Find out, learn about us, and then tell your colleagues, your partners, your customers. I think, again, information is so powerful and important, and so getting the word out about good work being done and people who are coming through our program and who are ready to work and wanting to work and ready to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can say for Craig and I, so we've been a guest speaker with the program before. Nothing but positive things. It was wonderful to be able to do, but not with Career Launch, but with the Mass Commission for the Blind. We've also been that mock interview for individuals. So this is and I've mentioned it again in a couple of slides, a very, very powerful thing that if you can, you don't have to be hiring. You're just spending the time and giving somebody who's gonna be very, very unsure and very nervous a handle that they're coming in and just going through the process. It's one of the things in the world is doing. It's like Nike, just do it, right? It's being able to do it and then thinking, oh, I did that. That wasn't that bad. That wasn't that hard. Because you have to, it's one thing to think of it from the employer side. It's another thing to think of it from the individual side. You got to think about how they're now, having to deal and come into this whole situation. They got no idea and to go through that. So being able just to do that, is extremely, I would assume, extremely helpful. I mean, I'm saying it in terms of it, but, we enjoy doing it and, we're on the list, in terms of going through that. Okay, so one of the things that ties into that, which is October, is National Disability Employer Awareness Month. It's kind of the reason we did this, kind of the reason we were leading into it, right? And so ways that you as an employer, your organization, your company, your business can get involved with NDEAM. I'm not through with my beer yet, right? You can, so it's October, right? So you hold a kickoff event, and that kickoff event may be something simple as hey, let's look at or talk about some of the things that we're doing, right? As far as the company or the organization is concerned, or some of the initiatives that we want to put in place, and let's put a program or a calendar or an outline in place how we're going to make that happen over the next 3 months, 6 months, a year. As far as that. Disability Mentoring Day, it's technically the third Wednesday of October. That's 10/21 this year. It doesn't have to be that day. It's not like, hey, that's the only day you can do it, and it's that's it. That's a timeline. No, that's not the case. But it is that day, so that if, like Alicia said, maybe it's hosting somebody, maybe it's bringing somebody in, give them a sense of what it's like to be with your company or in your business, and doing it that way. A Lunch and Learn series, much like Alicia and Dina talked about, having guest speakers come in, have a guest speaker come in, have somebody come in and talk about some of this on a different level, and a way to do that. And a quick little plug here for the guys who are doing this, the Aries Foundation for Financial Education can help you with that. So if you ever do want to have any of that as far as topics or connecting you to some of these other organizations, it's part of what we do. Alicia mentioned volunteer opportunities, right? So volunteer opportunities, It's a great way to give back. A lot of organizations do it. A lot of these companies have needs, right? So a lot of these individuals and organizations that are supporting them have things, and Alicia gave you a couple that they do, just the Perkins School, but there are organizations all over the place that do this and have this. And same idea, like she mentioned about, hey, if you're doing some sort of interviewing, but if you are doing a job fair, are you reaching out and talking to those people, or going to, if you're doing college recruiting, are you asking them for their Office of Disability and setting up a time to make sure that you're there or have those individuals? It's an overlooked part of the process, right? So they have a whole office and a whole support team that's available that you can set up a specific time to have those students, or in a job fair, those individuals be part of it, right? And we talked about this whole onboarding thing, right? I don't want to keep beating that up, but it's really looking at going through and sort of what we just talked about, walking in somebody else's shoes and thinking about it from that point of view, and to say, am I, how would somebody else be dealing with this? Am I asking them this question? Like, I know in the, on the spectrum, again, Craig and I deal with a lot of organizations who work with people on the spectrum. You can't ask a question. It's a simple question, but you can't ask it that's sort of open-ended, because you're not going to get the right response. Or it may not come across as like, hey, I was asking you to do this. It wasn't a, just a toss up into the air type of thing. So there's ways that those need to be addressed and asked when dealing with that. So there's a lot of ways to get involved. These are just some of the thoughts, but it is coming up. It is October, so we wanted to just make sure that we mention that, keep that as something in process and thought of mind as ways to get in. But certainly that volunteering, or reaching out to Career Launch, as Alicia said, and contacting them, or giving yourself, or making your organization available, just even for the mock interviews, is a big plus in terms of dealing with everything.
Yeah, and I'll add that our next session begins the first week of October. Our next class starts on October 5th. So we will have opportunities within Career Launch, probably toward the end of the month, if people are looking for a way to volunteer specifically during October, we'd be able to help you out.
That's great. And that goes through, the program runs through the year, right?
Correct, yeah.
Right. And so when do they actually graduate? That's the question, right?
Well, that's a great question. So our program has 2 months of intense full-time training, followed by a year of individualized career services support. So they quote unquote graduate 14 months after their start date.
Right. But right now they're virtual, but before they were graduating from the Watertown campus.
Right. They were, and then either staying in the Boston area, depending on their employment situation. In our residential program in the fall, all of them wound up with jobs in the Boston area, so they all decided to stay here until the pandemic hit. So in theory, once they're done with their training, they can move home or to a new place or stay in Boston.
That's great.
5:15, Tom. Just to let you know.
What?
It's 5:15.
Thank you. Yeah, we're almost done. I'm wrapping up here. See, now you said that right as I was going to do a shameless plug. So there you go. I was going to do a shameless plug, and you just walked into the middle of it. So one of the things is what Craig and I did with Career Launch is we have a program that we put together for, essentially we did it originally for individuals and adult day programs, because we know that specifically on the spectrum that those 3 areas, but Dina mentioned it as well, that one of the areas, transportation is one, employment is one, and then the third one was money management, right? That's always a factor, and it's always a question. So Craig and I put together a program that is a finance and money management. It's done to football, right? So it's 4 quarters of football. We do, first quarter is budget and cash flows. Second quarter is in the red zone. That's dealing with credit cards. Third quarter is how to tackle debt. Fourth quarter is in the putting together your playbook or your game plan. And we call it balling on a budget. And that's what we do. And we did it for Career Launch, for that last class of Career Launch. So that was my shameless plug for the areas of information there. Is that
Don't be shameless about it. It's an incredible presentation, I have to say. Like the students had an incredibly good time. And they're laughing the whole time and they're learning a lot. I highly recommend bringing these two in. It's,
Well, we certainly appreciate it. And that's for us what it's all about. I mean, because that's, as we say, you know, we do this, and I said it's football, but we do it in custom Patriots jerseys, you know, and it's the NFL. And so, you know, everybody's just sort of like, hey, it's Patriots and having fun. And they don't realize that we're already 10 minutes into the presentation because we've just been going through with them and having some fun with them. So, you know, we enjoy doing it. We do it for a lot of the, not only the adult day programs, but we've started to do it to the high school aged with some of the CPACs as well. So we have a lot of fun with that. It's a fun thing. All right, so I'm going to close and come to the end. So one of the things we are going to send out to everybody, because we always ask that we send out evaluation forms. We like to make sure that the information we're sharing is relevant, it's topical, and we do absolutely value all the feedback we get from everyone. So we do ask you to take the time when we send this out to you to reply back to us with that. This is Craig and I. See, there we are in the custom Patriots jersey, are having fun. That's part of what we do in this process. That just gives you sort of our information and a little bit of detail for us, but that's us roaming around and having fun in our Patriots jerseys. That's just a planning offer. We usually make that. It's not appropriate for this particular one. So what's on tap? What's coming up? Not for this audience so much, right? So next week we're going to do 9 IRA mistakes. So anybody who's worried about what's going on with the pandemic or the market or anything like that, we will be touching on. But there are setup and things that happen when you're doing your retirement accounts that get overlooked and can be very, very costly, not only to you, but to your beneficiaries. So that's what we're talking about with that. On the 8th, we're going to be live at a local business in Newton. That's the Your German Kitchen. And I will tell you that if you are one of those individuals like myself that has a kitchen that might need to be redone, you can walk in there, but you won't ever leave. The stuff in there is unbelievable. So, you know, but we're also having a wine tasting that's being sponsored. So our Think with a Drink is actually being sponsored that evening by a company called Scout and Cellar. They're a how does she describe that, Craig, with her
Almost like organic wines.
The organic wines, like there's no additives or anything in them. So
no hangover.
That's right. That's it. The
wine
no
without the hangover, right?
The hangover. So how you can get a hold of the career launch. So their career launch at perkins.org. Hopefully, Alicia and Dina, I have that correct.
Yep.
Right? That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
if you have questions for them, you want to reach out, you want to volunteer, that's how you can reach out to them to start the conversation. For us, you can get a hold of us at info@aresfoundation.org. Our phone number is 617-431-5045. And then the last one is if there are any questions out there for anybody that we haven't touched on, if you got any questions that are remaining, just let us know. We're here just to answer them, why we've got these two on the line. And if something you're thinking about or have a question on, please let us know. Craig, I'm counting on you to look at the chat box because that's not.
No, we have no further questions. We had one question. That was it from Evelyn. Thank you very much to Evelyn.
Okay. So with that, I am going to stop it for this evening. So if you do have any follow-up, like I said, reach out to careerlaunch@perkins.org. You know, and this is the message we're trying to get out to as many organizations as we can, trying to connect with as many people as we can, just to make sure that happens. So to our guests, Alicia and Dina, thank you very much for this evening. We certainly appreciate it. It's a wealth of information and knowledge, and hopefully this will push out Career Launch to even further audiences and more connection, and hopefully we get that number up from 19.3%.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us.
Have a great evening, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks so much.